Hello and welcome to a discussion about the methodology used in the sociology of religion. In spite of little elucidation on this topic in general, some excellent studies pursuing qualitative and quantitative standards have been greatly beneficial in contributing to the methodology used in the sociology of religion. You see, there has been a radical change in social scientific methodology due to post-positivist philosophy of science and computerized assistance, and this has bestowed new avenues and opportunities. Let me come to the very basic definition of methods. Well, the very concept of methods, as you all must keep in mind, implies practical research techniques for the selection, collection and analysis of information. These methods must be realistic in illuminating the problem raised in a project as well as be germane to its theoretical framework. Thus, it must be clear for you all that methods serve as the basis for bridging the gap between theories and their empirical basis. A specific range of methods become adjunct for a specific research problem. For example, the phenomenological theories of Berger and Luckmann direct at the reconstruction of people's world views from written sources, field observations or in-depth interviews. Like the rational choice theory aims at methods procured from market research, the post-structuralist theory of Giddens is closely linked to his methodology, and therefore to his idea of double hermeneutics. Thus, different research methods have been put forward as a variety of theorists have focused upon their respective research problems. Methodology thus encompasses the questions which reach beyond the objective of a specific project. It highlights how appropriate research designs and research findings actually are from the perspective of philosophy of science. And if I come to the sociology of religion in particular, I can say that it presents a range of problems, complex in nature, which necessitate on the amalgamation of several types of information which are to be acquired by different methods. You see, we can portray the very idea of religion in diverse ways. Religion can be characterized as a worldview, an ideology, an organization, an attitude, a set of values as modes and motivations, or as an ethical disposition. A specific methodological approach is reflected by each of these functional definitions. By relying on social scientific methods, the sociology of religion has finally come to terms with what might constitute a religion when used by researchers. Any project in this regard depends upon the tunneling of its focus and extent. As a result, both nominal as well as operational definitions are necessary. The theoretical framework would be provided by the nominal definition, whereas the operational definition would assist in empirical grounding. In the event of an empirical investigation, the nominal definition is accompanied by an operational one. The task of procuring and organizing all the findings makes the study of religion quite exacting. Hence, the advancement of this field in general is dependent upon how effective is the merger of information procured from various studies that have utilized diverse methods. When regarded as discrete subject, religion and society appear to be greatly complex. Thus, analyzing religion in social contexts seems to be a complicated endeavor. Societies tend to become intricate when denoted by polytheism, syncretism, eclecticism or bricolage. On the other hand, the major characteristics of religion can portray its complexity. The framework proposed by Roderick Ninian Smart, a champion in the area of secular religious studies, is multifaceted and incorporates a ritual or practical angle to it, a doctrinal or philosophical one, a mythic or narrative one, an experiential or emotional one, an ethical or legal one, an organizational or social one, a material or artistic one, and finally the political and economic dimensions of religion. While the classification of religion into the spheres of believing and belonging has attracted the interest of many sociologists, others input a practical aspect into it. Perhaps the inference of nuances is directly related to the additional of this aspect, each of which demands a specific operationalization. This classification can be further classified. The American sociologist Charles Glock has proposed differences between 5 dimensions of religious commitment. These encompass experiential, ritualistic, ideological, intellectual and consequential. for an operationalization to be convincingly sufficing, both attachment and detachment to religion is mandatory. While making quantitative analysis, social attributes are observed as variables which are subject to a uniform measurement and assigned numbers. While talking about measurement, it is important to state that the sociology of religion involves varieties of measurement like dichotomizing, nominal classification, rank ordering, or interval scaling. The appropriateness of a particular model must also be kept in mind. You all should know that detailed planning, authentic measurement, and strict procedures for inquiry are an intrinsic part of quantitative studies. Quantitative studies may be longitudinal like panel studies. In some other cases, surveys may be utilized. Let me talk of some vital characteristics of surveys. Surveys are driven towards determining the outline of the distribution of the specific features in a sample collected from a population. These features imply attitudes. Surveys are based on studying items which are subjected to pilot tests to gauge their feasibility, time, cost, adverse events, and statistical variability in order to make predictions about the appropriate sample size and improve the study design before conducting a full-scale research project. In case of structured interviews, 2 lines of scales are utilized. The Gottman scale, which comprises questions having bifold answers like yes or no. The response returned can be comprehended by means of a single index on that scale, and in such the responses are ranked in an order. Thus, a respondent who agrees with a certain item also agrees with the lower ranked ordered items. This is in contrast with those projects which use a Likert scale or a Thurston scale. The method of factor analysis is often used to locate that set of items which can be incorporated into a single measure. Factor analysis is a statistical method that tests whether a set of items are closely correlated in a way that the correlation can be accredited to a common background factor. In the case where the factors are interdependent, a rotation can be used to trace which of the items can be attributed to each factor. Lastly, the last of the characteristics of surveys I would like to discuss about is that surveys are dependent upon cross-sectional information. Thus, the causal hypotheses are tested by conditional covariations. The identification of reliable and stable patterns of covariation between characteristics in order to find out the causal relations is the task of quantitative studies. To avoid any false correlation or Simpson's paradox, all relevant variables must be incorporated. Only when this has been done that a graphic correlation model like diagram then comes up with causal chains among rank ordered data. Two important studies will help you to understand quantitative surveys better. Those conducted by Gerhard Emanuel Lenski and Professor David D. Vowes. Gerhard Lenski was a distinguished American sociologist renowned for his work on the sociology of religion. His is a classic example of a quantitative survey conducted in 1961 in analyzing the impact of religion upon different aspects of human social life. He recognized religion as having two dimensions: doctrinal orthodoxy and devotional orthodoxy, whereas the social context was determined by economy, politics and family. By interviewing a sample of persons from Detroit, Lenski concluded that religion defeated the institutional mechanisms of the country and also cast an influence on the day-to-day lives of the people. Professor David D. Vowes, an emeritus Australian professor, is renowned for his prowess in the area of survey research methods and research designs in the social sciences and family sociology. The publication of his book Surveys in Social Research in the year 1961 portrays the standard method for operationalizing religion, in addition to highlighting dimensions. However, a number of criticisms have been launched since Vowes ignores measurement errors. Now, let's move on to a discussion on the statistical models of regression analysis versus LISREL analysis. The former is a statistical process for determining the relationships among variables. It makes use of several methods to analyze various variables when the stress is on the relationship between dependent variable and one or more independent ones. This model of analysis helps us to understand how the distinctive value of a dependent variable alters when any one of the independent variable is changed, while the other independent ones remain unchanged. It exhibits a reasonably simple set of causal issues like the stable probabilistic outcome of a one-way procedure, which includes all the influencing elements. In this kind of analysis, often dummy variables are made use of to classify data into mutually exclusive categories or to allow for dichotomous independent variables. LISREL analysis demonstrates a comparatively distinct approach by taking into consideration the covariations between the factors. Carl Joeskog, a former scientist at the Educational Testing Service in Princeton, New Jersey, and later a professor at Uppsala University, Sweden, along with a fellow professor, Doug Sarbaum, developed this form of analysis. LISREL models are much closer to theoretical expositions, as it allows for feedback mechanisms as well as measurements errors. A point that should be noted here is that the statistical models have come much closer to the theoretical premises of sociology of religion, but the outcomes derived were still quite problematic to analyze. For example, the number of variables used in certain regression analysis may often be too wide-ranging, and therefore to make the analysis feasible, the number has to be reduced. Also, the statistical models are too futuristic, and hence the researcher as well as the readers might as well face certain confusions. You should also have a grip over the knowledge that qualitative studies employ a multiplicity of approaches. Let me state some of the important features of qualitative studies. You see, qualitative studies concentrate on the hermeneutic interpretation of the complex cultural phenomena, which are based on the element of consistency or uniformity. This either connotes that the expressions do not contradict each other or denominate that each of them is derived from a more extensive system of meaning, that is, from a worldview. Qualitative studies also often render a thick description of a single case or a few cases, either on the basis of human observation in their natural environment or by an understanding of the internal or by an understanding of the internal world view of human agents through meticulous interviews, and hence such case studies often suggest a comparison between the studied case and the normal society. A number of qualitative methods depend on a single researcher, and in this the researcher's perspective becomes a methodological issue. Let me cite the study by Karen McCarthy Brown, an anthropologist who specialized in the anthropology of religion. In her groundbreaking work, Mama Lola, a voodoo priestess in Brooklyn, it is seen that Brown was very close to the priestess to the extent of engaging herself in rites of initiation into voodoo. Thus, by allowing personal opinions in her analysis and presentation, subjectivism attained a positive place in the study. However, such subjectivism can be lessened if a number of field workers are engrossed in a project and their corrections controlled for subjective prejudice. Meredith McGuire, professor of sociology and anthropology at Trinity University, in one of her most renowned works, Ritual Healing in Suburban America, illustrated this approach in the study of healing groups. The study aimed at obtaining an understanding of the believer's frame of knowledge and also of their actions from their own perspectives. Unexpected behavior too was illustrated as meaningful within the believer's frame of reference. In this way, a scientific subject-object distance is preserved. The study also entailed participant observation, where all members of the research group were required to elucidate their personal stance. The observer too evinced unfeigned interest in order to partake. There were groups whose views were radically different from that of the observer, and hence a supplementary observer was called upon. Thus, when each observer participated in more number of groups, a scientific distance could be sustained. A number of in-depth interviews were conducted, which comprised of emotionally moving accounts of sufferings. This required the interviewers to respond as fellow beings, but the most important criticism in McGuire's study is the fact that it is merely exploratory and hence failed to take into account experiences and ideas about the larger belief system. In order to avoid subjectivism in qualitative studies, a methodical and well-documented analysis is mandatory. There are different ways of analyzing qualitative data. Also, the identical set of data can be analyzed in several ways. Like the classical method, the modern method, the correspondence analysis method, and the qualitative comparative analysis. Let me discuss each of them one by one. First is the classical method. The classical method of analyzing of qualitative information includes writing reports, deleting impertinent passages, classifying passages into broad categories, arranging them into main categories, and relating these categories to each other in a rational and theoretical presentation. Such example is Glasser and Strauss's grounded theory method. This method exemplifies a qualitative methodology that directs itself to be flexible on the one hand and rigorous on the other. Instead of beginning with a hypothesis, this method is the collection of data through diverse methods accompanied by a coding of the empirical evidence, first as thematic coding and second as coding of associating themes and the relations between them. Second is the modern method. Well, inspired from the grounded theory method, a set of computer assisted tools has been promoted in those cases where the material is too expensive. By utilizing such tools, the researcher is able to ascertain the relevant passages in a document and then ascribe the passages having the same meaning with a code. But it must be kept in mind that if the coding is too mechanistic, the text might lose its contextual meaning. Hence, some suitable coding methods like the programmatic coding becomes more desirable, as such methods can be utilized in collecting all the expressions which are related to a particular theme in a given empirical material. However, it is principally the task of the analyst to formulate the interpretation. Next is the correspondence analysis method. The correspondence analysis method is usually utilized when a huge set of qualitative cases are to be examined. This method was developed by Greenacres and Bellasis for representing an outline of proximity with its diverse characteristics analyzed in the graphic format. The study basically directs at locating the patterns of correspondence between the rows and the columns. One such example is the relation between religious membership, that would be the row criteria, and employment, that would be the column criteria. However, it fails to point out why the criteria are associated. Lastly, I would come to the qualitative comparative analysis. Well, Charles Regan has formulated this technique, who was the Chancellor's Professor of Sociology at the University of California in 1987. This method is useful for analyzing data sets by listing and counting all the combinations of variables observed in that set and then applying the rules of logical inference in order to point out which descriptive inferences the data supports. This approach enables one to compare a substantially small number of cases, provided that the number of variables is also small. For a clearer understanding of the application of this method, an example has been provided in the text or the corresponding script of this module, which I suggest you to refer. Well, in answering the issue of validity, quantitative approaches seem more appropriate than qualitative one. As a rigid and systematized procedure is more tenable than a flexible ad hoc strategy based on memory. But we must keep in mind that procedural precision and rigidity are not the only determinants of the validity of a construct. This problem in qualitative studies is avoided by using certain ill-defined conditions in their conclusion. Thus, although the proponents of qualitative and quantitative approaches might not agree on some rudimentary grounds, they also face the challenge of assuring others of the validity of their chosen approach. Now, I move on to discuss the problem with measurement in these approaches. Quantitative studies face a basic problem regarding suitability of measurement. This is primarily due to the fact that they are based on the study of a limited number of variables which are measured by a narrow range of indicants, which, although are relatable to the theoretical scheme, may not encompass all of its relevant features. However, cross-reference to qualitative studies is one way of attaining accuracy in measurement, as it involves a wide range of indicants. Another problem that is faced by quantitative studies deals with causal explanation based on the covariation model. The covariation model is a theory where people make causal inferences explaining the reason which causes other people to behave in a specific way. Here, the causal mechanism connecting the independent variables with the dependent ones is hardly hypothesized. A solution to this problem is by cross-references to processual approaches that rest on self-examining realism. In qualitative studies, there is an inclination of the issue of validity to center on prejudice, be it in selecting the information or the observations or the natural propensity of the research worker. In such research designs, therefore, the issue of validity is frequently called into question in an intersubjective sense. To avoid such false beliefs and attain an intersubjective consistency, the methodological tools and techniques must be documented in a proper manner. In case of qualitative study of the general sociology of religion, it is more suitable to aim at the possible and available comparisons, or to confront it with the results of other studies, both similar and diametrical, to corroborate conclusions, thereby establishing originality. Let me now move on to a discussion on the methodological ideals of the great classical thinkers Max Weber and Emil Durkheim. You see, the concept of methodological divide surfaced in the ideas of these statesmen. The methodology of Weber was greatly influenced by Neo-Kantian philosophy, a revived type of philosophy propounded by the German philosopher Immanuel Kant in the 18th century. Weber preached a methodology oriented towards the understanding of social acts, and with the help of that, describing their results and consequences. He viewed sociology as an extension of history, based on investigations on ideal type of social actors. In spite of these principles, Weber did not eschew the usage of statistical data in his most renowned religious work on the Protestant ethic. Durkheim's methodology was inspired by positivism, the study of social facts as things characterized by certain common and external qualities was urged by him. Durkheim's study on religion of the Australian Aboriginal Aruntas was an ethnographic presentation, unlike Weber's, who supported his work on statistical grounds. The British philosopher and political economist John Stuart Mill widely proposed the need for cross-cultural comparisons. Mill's methodological ideals hugely inspired Weber and Durkheim. To this date, comparative studies greatly shape sociology of religion, though standardized comparisons are not so prevailing in sociological studies of religion. Therefore, we can say that a major challenge in methodology is to devise systematized comparisons which can accentuate both the similarities and the dissimilarities, as well as identify the explanations. Since a comparison is based on forming a speculative standard which to some extent modifies the perspectives of the group studied, bringing any religious group into a comparative system indicates going beyond its own description and understanding. In conclusion, I would like to give a brief overview of quantitative and qualitative studies. Of course, I would like to consider certain premises in this regard. First is causality. On the basis of causality, it can be said that while quantitative studies analyze perennial events either through covariation or through regression analysis, qualitative studies use procedures like in-depth interviews, processual analysis or comparative analysis. Thus, both the methods make use of different aspects of the complex of causal analysis, though neither of them may totally encompass itself. Second is objectivism and subjectivism. Here it can be said that while an implicit search for objective facts is the driving force behind quantitative studies, qualitative studies on the other hand look out for a subjective understanding. However, in disciplines like sociology of religion, objectivism is impractical and subjectivism inadequate. Third is information. Well, if you speak solely from the perspective of sociology of religion, both quantitative and qualitative information are essential for throwing light on the subject. This may allow us to call both kinds of information to be mutually illuminating. For example, in order to study church commitment, one must know the rules for membership, the rates of membership, and the reasons for being members. This isn't feasible if only one of these methods is applied. Thus, methodology combinations become more significant in defining the various aspects of the phenomenon and exhibit a consummate and multifarious scenario. Fourth is combination. You see, rather note that quantitative and qualitative methods complement each other and are not mutually exclusive. A qualis of both these methods can serve several other functions. It provides additional information, eases the checking of validity of each of the methods, and finally specifies the extent of the generalized conclusion. While on one hand, quantitative studies aim at representation of the population using a few standard measurements. On the other hand, qualitative ones try to include every perspective by obtaining information from a few cases. In the former, a problem often emerges regarding the extension of the scope of measurements, while in the latter, the problem lies in generalizing the findings from cases previously investigated. By blending both the methods, it becomes feasible to devise more specific and distinct conclusions regarding representation and thematic scope. Irene Barker, a professor of sociology and an emeritus member of the London School of Economics, in her famous work, The Making of a Muni, exposited the study in the sociology of religion based on a calculated blending of methods. The book depicts the religious conversion process to the unification church, whose members are sometimes informally referred to as munis. The book contains the perspectives of believers as well as the outsiders, and also depicts the personal viewpoints of an individual muni, internal relationships among the munis and between the munis and the outsiders, and so on. For this purpose, a combination of different methods was necessary. Firstly, an initial participant observation was carried on to make the research worker ready to go through intensive sessions of interviews. Secondly, before beginning, the pilot test hypotheses were formulated based on primary analysis, which were then operationalized into questionnaires. These questionnaires were then given out, and the answers to this were either pre-coded or post-coded by the helping hands. These answers were then compared with answers to similar or related questions by either groups. Significant comparisons were also made with those respondents who had entry to the sort of social context from which munis might be enlisted. It is therefore evident that Barker's analysis was dependent on a miscellaneous set of information fetched out from a wide range of sources. Such studies involving methodological combinations have posed some challenges as well, but with an enhancement in the number of such combined approaches, the number of potential designs also increases. We must remember that a methodological diversity does not in any way suggest a paradigm crisis. It points at a sophisticated reflection on the methodological challenge, analyzing complicated religions in a transforming social context. With this, I come to an end of the discussion on sociology of religion, the methodological perspective. Thank you for attending the lecture. We will meet on some other discussion on some other topic.